As a warning, this video has some mild audio issues due to me recording outside, being unfamiliar with how to manage audio that comes with that. There will be some bird chirping, but everything's been normalized, so it's not going to be peeking out your microphone or anything. It just might be hard to hear me. Have a good time. Hey, how's it going? It's me, Lex, back at you with a new perspective. Today we're going to be reviewing WARDEN. It's a D20 RPG by Ghostspark, also known as Raven Haunts. This is a genre-agnostic TTRPG. It's descended originally from a Pathfinder 2nd edition hack by the same author, called Warden. You might have heard of it. The main goal of the original Warden was to sort of agnosticize a lot of Pathfinder's mechanics, sort of bring them together so that you could make more varied characters and have more free-form development. But as the author was working on that, he decided that a lot of the choices that Pathfinder had made were a bit too rigidly stuck, and decided to work on WARDEN, which, despite its own claims to the contrary within its contents, it's pretty rough on itself. I would say it's a standalone game. It uses some of the same ideas, like adding your level to your proficiency and having a 3-action system, but I think it does enough with the mechanics to make its own thing. So I'm going to be going chapter by chapter here. Since I got sort of a new setting I'm not too used to, and I'll be giving you my main thoughts as I go, maybe doubling back. The first chapter is just a simple introduction. It's the same thing as most TTRPGs have, where they're just talking about what is an RPG, how do you play it, etc. When you get into the second chapter, it's the introduction and fundamentals of the game, its base mechanics. WARDEN functions off of a system called difficulty values and a D20, adding your proficiency to your roll. So if you attempt a difficulty value 10 task, the values are separated into increments of 5 from 10 all the way to 30, depending on difficulty. You roll your D20, you add any of your modifiers, which usually includes your proficiency, which would be your level plus the amount of points that you put into that path. We'll get to that in a little bit here. And if you meet it, you beat it. If you beat it by 10, you critically succeed. If you miss it by 10, you critically fail, just like in Pathfinder 2nd edition. These difficulty values add a little bit of interesting mechanical depth to the system, or mechanical fluidity, I guess I might say, in as much as multiple attack penalty is a great example. Your attack actions, their difficulty values are determined by the combination of your multiple attack penalty and the target's relevant defense. So your first attack in a turn is going to be at difficulty value 10, plus either their toughness or perception, based on whether or not you're making a melee or ranged attack, respectively. Whereas your second attack is going to be at 15. And then actions can interact with that uniquely, like the aim action reduces your tier by 1, which means that you can make a second attack at minimum multiple attack penalty in a round, but that's only for ranged weapons and only if you spend your full turn doing so, as an example. Something else that I like about it is that it means that players can automatically tell you if they know they failed. There's a little bit of leeway where they might succeed at the base check but miss the defense. The way that I tend to run it is you'll ask them how much they beat their difficulty value by. So if they say they beat it by 3, then you just compare it. If the toughness is 3 or less, then they hit. That's the core of the game. That's going to be all of your resolution mechanics baked into that D20 plus proficiency. There are different bonus types that can be added on as well, but that's mostly going to be minor stuff, things like aiding or maybe some item bonuses or a status bonus here or there if relevant. The base mechanics also include a system called Affinity and Trust and Fate Points, wherein players are encouraged to roleplay with one another throughout a session, which gives them fate points. It's much like hero points in Pathfinder, but you can spend them for more interesting effects. Things like reducing damage on an attack you take, or other things that I'm not super familiar with because I've never been a biggest fan of meta-narrative currencies like that. But rest assured, I do find it more interesting than Pathfinder's hero points. And then as you perform these role-playing scenarios with your fellow players and are given these fate points that you can re-roll checks with and etc., you'll also be increasing your trust with that player, which means that naturally over the course of sessions, the aid action will become stronger and stronger as long as there's a bird below the camera. As long as you continue to work with the same party members, you'll get better and better together. The last bit of the core mechanics, and perhaps the thing that I find the most interesting about Warden, is its campaign map structure for the game. Warden is built more specifically for sort of loose play or sandbox style play, and so therefore the game world is divided up into nodes, which are comprised of different pieces of information that the players are able to access. Some might be secret and need to be unlocked. Some might be on clocks. So for example, if one major aspect of a campaign takes place in a specific city, then that city might be a node, and within it might be contained, say, a threat for representing the mafia. And the threat has a clock on it where whenever that reaches 0, they'll do something problematic, and it sort of puts the onus onto the players. Then we're going to move into the phases of gameplay here, segueing straight over. You'll notice that I said clocks. The clocks are then also managed by the players through the phases of gameplay in Chapter 3. All of Warden is divided up into 3 action systems. We have the conflict encounter type right at the very bottom. When every moment matters, you're cutting between actions, things are tense. That's going to be conflict. It functions very similarly to Pathfinder 2nd Edition, although with some minor bookkeeping changes that make things simpler in the moment to run. At the start of every round, numbered conditions tick down, which means that conditions can be applied, such as burning 3, and you'll burn for 3 rounds. It makes bookkeeping quite easy. And then at the top of the round, everyone is able to take out-of-turn actions. The most prevalent of these, I would say, would be ready or take the initiative. Ready lets you prepare an action. If the trigger is met, you can spend your reaction that you get at the top of the round, just like in Pathfinder, to take that action. Or take the initiative lets you take your turn. You can take the initiative action whenever, and this is because the initiative system is very simple to track and intuitive, and I find it adds a lot of mechanical depth. I talked about it in my Weird Wizard video, where the enemies always go first, and then the party goes second, but you have the ability to drop that extra action, taking the initiative, so that you can act before the enemies do, or after any individual one of them, if the situation has changed and maybe you need something more. But back over to talking about the wider frame of a campaign, exploration is the next tier up from conflict. Exploration actions are meant to be things that take place over the course of, a day, or maybe even abstracted up to a couple of days. The idea is sort of traveling, going shopping, all sorts of things that you'd handle in loose play in a more narratively focused RPG. And it also functions on a 3-action system. You get 3 actions, and once you take them, a exploration round triggers, and things meaningfully change. It's a vague statement, but a powerful one if you have the tool in your tool belt. Because in a dungeon, that can mean dungeon turns progress. If you're just outside traveling, that might mean a check for weather, or simply time passing. It becomes noon, it becomes night. Time to go to sleep, guys. Can't do too much in one day. And that level can be tied to individual clocks. Any of these can be. The last phase of gameplay would be the horizon phase. This is when we zoom out to sort of days, weeks, months, even years passing, the far more abstract concepts of working on big picture movements, things passing, and once again it's 3 actions and then a round elapses, and depending on the narrative, things will change. Combined with the campaign map, this means that pretty much any action the player can take is driven by them and meaningfully progresses the story. It works great for West Marches as well as sandbox play, as it means that you can just give players set amounts of actions or set clocks that will sort of stop them and let them do whatever they want. They have to drive it forwards. Next up, the book just talks about environmental effects. I'm not going to get too bogged down in the details here. You know how it is. It's dark, it's raining, it's slippery, what do hazards look like, etc. There's a lot of fun stuff in here, like explosions in Warden are ran as a sort of range increment system. At the epicenter of the explosion, you take a lot more damage than you do right at the edge. And it's in fact the way to get the highest damage in the entire game is with explosives right at the point of impact with no cover. It's a lot of fun. Moving on to Chapter 5, we have the character rules, and this is where I get to talk about the more sort of free-form attitude that it takes with its structuring of players. Warden tries to sort of keep the game more grounded. HP and SP, strain points, start at 10 each at the start of play, and they don't progress higher than 20 unless you take a specific ability, in which case you can get them all the way up to about 30. And so a lot of damage prevention and infliction is influenced by armor. It'll just be flat reductions to the damage you take, or additions if you're wearing something that's weak to it. But here in the character rules, we have the more interesting stuff of what you actually get to choose as you level up. At the start of play and as you level up, you're able to put advancement points into different paths or defenses that then give you either abilities or just bonuses to your stats. Abilities, then, is the next chapter down, basically, as it talks about defenses and then skills, but I'm going to skip to abilities for a moment just to talk about them. Abilities would be equivalent to sort of taking entire archetypes or even some of the more exciting feats in Pathfinder. The concept of fire magic, the ability to shapeshift, dual wielding particularly effectively. These are all examples of abilities. And Raven Haunts, the author, sort of tried to take the approach of, is there something in media that's very exciting that people would like to do? I'll make an ability for that. So there's a lot of good stuff you can find in here. It's broken up into the 3 different paths. There's combat, which is your fighting acuity. There's special, which is all sorts of magic and telekinesis, anything supernatural, more or less. And then there's skill, which is broken down into the different categories of skill. Rather than each skill being independently progressed, when you progress the skill path, you gain a skill training, and any skills you're trained in, you gain that bonus for. And then each of them have their own abilities, which can further enhance them, from mobility, giving you enhanced speed or enhanced ability to swim, to crafting, letting you effectively use your tools as weapons. A lot of fun stuff here. And then you can also always take general abilities, which are more about fundamentals, stat bonuses, things that don't quite fit into any of those categories. We'll take a hop back then, past some defenses. I already went over them. They're not too much to say. If there's one major critique I have, it's that paths and defenses, the defenses are kind of uninteresting to invest into. They're just statistical buffs. They are important if you invest very heavily into your toughness and you pick up the tough as nails feats. You can gain a lot of hit points and be pretty hard to damage. Combine that with some heavy armor, and you're going to be a very effective frontliner. But you're not getting any abilities, and the abilities are very exciting. Moving to Chapter 7 then, that's where we have the skills. I already explained the core conceit of them. The skill path is going to determine your ability to act on any of the skills that you're proficient in, and you gain more skill trainings whenever you invest into it. Next up, it's got setting rules. Warden is a genre-agnostic TTRPG, so it's trying to fulfill a lot of different niches at once. You can play sci-fi, you can play fantasy, you can play modern day. And the setting adjustments are how you actually get these effects in practice. So, there's equipment determined by your tech level of the setting you're running in. If you're in sci-fi, you have access to sci-fi goods and everything below them. Whereas if you're running in the Middle Ages, you're only going to have those classical items. Then it's split up into a whole section of alterations where you can add components that not necessarily have to be included to include them in the campaign, but if you include the alteration, it's going to be a focus. So, for example, the alchemy alteration isn't necessary to include alchemy in your high magic campaign. The deity alteration doesn't have to be for deities to exist, but it means that someone's interested in actually using those mechanics, playing with them in the world, focusing on them. And it means that you can sort of tailor the game to what is interesting to you, or you can make interesting combinations of things. What if we did zombie survival, but with deities and bionics? Then we move over to Chapter 10. This is Game Warden advice. It's mostly going to be little components and bits and bobs about how to run the game effectively, how to use the tools that it provides you. But it does start getting into, and this is where some of the appendix content gets involved. All of Warden is also built to be very transparent in how it's designed. Items have point values, and enemies that you face also have point values that are used to construct them. And the Game Warden section at the back here provides you with all the tools you need to make stuff that would fit directly into the core book as far as the author is concerned. And then, since you know the rules, you also know better how to bend or break them. And then, finally, in the Game Warden section, there's the bit of opponent, or the subchapter talking about opponents and how they function. Opponents in Warden are meant to be handled as interestingly as possible. And that is to say, if something is important, then it's not going to take 2 hours at the table. It has a very lovely layout for how it shows enemies, which I'll actually put up on screen rather than trying to bring over to the camera now that I think about it. That makes running the stat blocks very fast and intuitive, as well as actually setting them up at the table. Takes just a couple of seconds to toss something together. And then combats are sort of divided up into tiers of how important they are. If a combat isn't super important, then the enemies are going to be run as mooks. They're very simple, generally pretty easy to kill, but they are going to wear on the party over time. And so take away some of those precious exploration actions that might be progressing important clocks that the party doesn't want to happen, or at the very least it's going to be making that sun tick along in the sky until it's time to go to bed. But then the next level up is adversaries, where they get more expansive access to different traits and items and abilities, so they're more engaging to run and can actually last through a combat. This is if you really want to focus on something. And then finally, the nemesis of your campaign. It's going to be any sort of big boss that you want to keep around or have do something awesome. They get extended power budgets, they scale along with the players so that they're always going to be a challenge. And they have some narrative-focused abilities where you can have them get away in a helicopter if things start going wrong. Or call in backup, all sorts of fun stuff like that. There's also a lot of very lovely optional rules. Not too much to talk about there. You'd have to play the game to know for yourself whether or not they're interesting to you. Appendix A is the last one that I think I'm actually going to talk about here. It's the settings appendix, and it includes examples of how to build a campaign, or at least the basis of a campaign, from just the stuff that's already laid out here. The book doesn't provide a ton of direct advice, but I think that the settings are what really tie the book together into looking at it and being like, yeah, this can make a game very easily. A setting is comprised of its tech level, its alterations, a couple of sample enemies, sample encounters, and maybe some clocks and custom content. So for example, the Red River City setting, that's my favorite in the book, is a zombie survival based around two different clocks. One clock which makes the zombies in the city evolve new powers and become harder to kill, and a second clock which, when it runs down, the military will nuke the city to destroy the zombie apocalypse. There's a couple of tidbits about different lore encounters and locations and NPCs in the settings, some custom rules about refilling your magazines for your firearms, since you won't be able to go shopping in the zombie apocalypse. And it all ties together very nicely, in my mind anyway, into a full-fledged campaign on just a couple of pieces of paper. So, yeah. It's been a while since I made a video. Sorry for the wait. I've just been struggling with actually pulling together tabletop role-playing games. I've been reading a ton of them, but not playing as much as I'd like. So, hopefully I can get back into that. But, for now, Warden has been a blast to read, a blast to play around with, and I hope you enjoy it as well. Let me know what you think. See ya! See ya! Leave a like if you liked the video, subscribe if you would like to see more, and check out any of my other stuff down below if it interests you.